Good evening, grade fours. I trust that you are well and that you had an amazing day so far. All right, so we are going to start with our lessons for today, right? So you are going to go to www to the a+students.ca page, right? So once you are on the a+students.ca page, you're going to log in with your username as well as your password. All right, so once you've logged in with your username as well as your password, you are then going to select the subject of language, which is English, right? And then we go to grade 4. All right, so the chapter for today is action verbs. So we are going to click on, you're going to scroll down all the way till you get to action verbs, right? So we click on action verbs. And then the lessons for today is to use action verbs as well as to identify action verbs, right? So we're going into the first one, which is to use action verbs. So you'll basically see um, the tutorial page in front of you where we are going action verbs, right? So before we go on to the lesson on using action verbs, firstly, an action verbs, it tells you what a noun does, right? Right? So it tells us what the noun does, right? And it basically also shows action. So it shows action. So it tells us what the noun does, or another word for it, we can say it shows action. It's something that someone or something is doing, right? And if you are following, so we are now basically on, if you go to this page that interview, right? See? Ooh. All right, so there we have um, a few examples, right? So once again, an action verb tells you what a noun does, right? And it expresses an action, whether it can be physical or it can be mentally. Physical is like when you do something, physical, you are running, jumping, so on. Mentally, it's something that you're doing in your mind, right? Like, for example, thinking, your thoughts, right? Those are things that you're doing mentally, right? And here are a few examples of action verbs, right? So a few examples are climb, it's an action verb. To dance, it's an action verb because it's something that you're doing. Laughing or laugh is an action verb. Write, you are literally sitting with your pen or pencil in your hand, crayons in your hand, and you are writing a letter or writing the notes down. Thinking, it's your thoughts, it's mental, right? That is an action verb. To run, right? It's a physical thing that you are doing. And walk, right? So these are but a few action verbs that I have written down so far. So in the meantime, during the course of the lesson, right, you're going to think of a few more action verbs, right? And then we will write down more action verbs or more verbs that basically adds on to the ones that we already have. And remember, we said an action verb, it tells us what the noun does, and a noun, it names a person, a place, an animal, or a thing, right? So, which means that an action verb will either tell us what the person does, what an animal does, or let's say basically what the things do, right? So, either person or animal does. All right, so if we go back to our tutorial lesson, use the action verbs, right? All right, so before we go to the questions that we have over there, once again, an action verb, it tells us what the noun does, right? And we say the noun names a person, a place, a thing, or an animal, right? All right, an action verb. So it shows action, right? And it tells us what it does. That is a verb. So she ate an apple, right? So ate, it's something that she did, right? She ate an apple, right? We smiled. So smile is something that we did, right? So you need to ask yourself questions like, if it, for example, says she ate an apple, then you ask yourself, what did she do, right? Because it tells us what a noun does, right? So with she is the noun, right? So we can then say, what did she do? Or we can ask, what did she do? And we can say, she ate an apple, right? Another one is we smile. What did we do? We smile. So smile is our action verb, right? Then also some action verbs, it tells you about actions hard to see, right? And this is the mental part that we were talking about. Remember these ones, it is more physical, right? These are the physical nouns that we were talking about, right? And then it says that some action verbs, it tells us about actions that are hard to see. And we thought hard. So what did we do? We had to think hard. So we thought hard, right? Thought is an action verb. It is thought. It's like thinking, right? We like the show. Right? Like, right? So these are all mental, right? Remember we spoke about, or I mentioned that some action verbs are physical and some are mental. Oopsie. Some are mental, right? So things like and things like as well as thought or think, right? Those are all mental, right? So that's mental. That shows it's like, for example, like, how do you physically like, right? We can't physically like, right? But I can say that I like it because that is more like a feeling, right? I like the show, which means that I show excitement, right? I start smiling when I when the show comes on, which means that you like it mentally, internally, it's like an emotion, and then you smile physically because of liking the show and because it's your favorite show, maybe, right? Same with thought, right? It's something that it's like you're thinking, it's in your mind without even talking, without even saying anything, without even writing it down. It is a thought, right? And these are all meant thinking about it, right? Now you can maybe say something or write something down where the physical aspect of that happens, right? So once again, an action is what a noun does, and some action verb tells us about the action that are hard to see. And an action verb can either be physical or it can be, right? All right, so if we look at the first question, we need to complete the sentence with the action verb, right? So Kenji want me to help him with his baseball swing, right? Something that he helped him to do, right? So Kenji want me to help him with his baseball swing, right? So in this case, it is persuading, right? So it's like saying, please, like help me with my baseball swing. I will give you sweets, or I will play with you, or we'll play with my Xbox, or we'll play with my PSP, right? It's not going to be long. It will just be 30 minutes, right? It's like persuading somebody, right? So persuading. So Kenji persuaded me to help him with his baseball swing. All right. The second one. Bill always what when he takes a photo, right? And this usually happens to all of us, right? So Bill blinks, right? And usually that happens to me too. I blink because sometimes you need to pose for a very long time with your eyes open, right? So now by the time the picture is taken, you blink. So Bill always blinks, right? This is what he does with his eyes when you take his photo. Blinks. All right, so now if you look at this next one, I think the Giants are the best team and dad me, right? Is it dad champions with me or what does dad do with him, right? We need to choose the correct one. Let's go down. All right, so yes is if you want somebody to agree with you, then we say agree, right? So yes, I agree with you. So the best answer is agree. So I think the Giants are the best team and dad agrees with me, right? Not champions, right? Not that because champion makes sense in a sentence. And remember, you need to also find a word that also makes sense or matches the sentence, right? So it needs to also sound proper or it needs to sound correct or it either needs to make sense within a sentence before we choose it, right? So I think the Giants are the best team and dad agrees with me, right? Because champion means something else. All right. So that is about a few um actions and how we can use it, right? And in this case, we use it within a sentence, right? So in the meantime, have you even thought of a few more action verbs, right? So think of more action verbs because we're going to go back to our whiteboard and we are going to identify a few more action verbs, right? And remember, we said action verbs are both physical as well as mental, right? It is things that you physically do, or it is maybe things that you either shows in motion, mental, mind, right? All right, so before we go on to the next lesson, let us test ourselves on if we will be able to use action. All right, we need to complete the sentence with the action verbs. I think the Giants are the best team. And Dad, what with me? Does Dad champion with me or does Dad agree with me? So Dad agrees with me or Dad champion with me? We need to choose the correct one. Is it option one, which is champion, or option two, which is agrees? All right, so we are going to choose the word that agrees with us. And why? Because champion just does not make sense, right? So agrees beautiful. So agrees is correct. So well done to the one that chose agrees. The clowns at the circus perform amazing tricks, or the clowns at the circus curiosity amazing tricks. Is it option one, which is perform, or option curiosity? The clown at the circus perform amazing tricks, or curiosity amazing tricks? All right, so we are going to choose perform, right? Because he is performing amazing tricks, right? Curiosity is something totally different, right? So if you have performed, then well done. My grandmother knits a pair of mittens for me every winter, Or my grandmother sleeve a pair of mittens for me every winter. We need to choose the correct action verb right within that sentence or that matches the sentence. Is it my grandmother knits a pair of mittens for me every winter? Or my grandmother sleeve a pair of mittens for me every winter? Are we choosing option one, which is knits, or option two, which is sleeve? All right, so knits, wonderful. So that is correct. So good job. So knits is correct. My stepdad sweeps and mops the kitchen floor every week, or my stepdad sweeps and faucet the kitchen floor every week. Is it option one, which is mops, or is it option two, which is faucet? We need to choose the correct word or action verb that matches the correct sentence, right? This is our way of showing that we will be able to use the action verbs within a sentence. So is it mops or what, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to choose faucet, right? And that is incorrect. So if you chose mops, then well done, right? So the reason why I chose the incorrect word is because once you, for example, make a mistake, right, and you choose the incorrect word, then what happens is that it will take you back to the tutorial page and it will basically tell you how you need to do it, right? And then you just scroll down and it will basically tell you what the best option is. So yes, it's the best answer is mops, right? So he mops and he sweeps the kitchen floor, right? And it tells us what the stepdad does. The faucet word does not even make sense or does not even match the sentence, or it doesn't even match the sentence correctly. So if you chose mops, then done. All right, so now we're going to go back and we're going to go to the next lesson, right? And the next lesson is identifying action verbs. So the first lesson we did was to use action verbs and we use it with specific sentence. So now we're going to identify action verbs. All right, so what happened was that we first said that an action verb tells us what a noun does, right? And some action verbs also tell us about actions that are hard to see, right? Like thoughts. We don't see thoughts, right? Unless you talk about it or you write it down. We like the show. We only see the likes based on the action that we perform afterwards, like by smiling or saying that we like the show, right? But it's not something that you can see. Like and thoughts are not things that you can see, and that is mental, right? She ate an apple, something that she did, ate, chewed on it, right? Finished it, smiled, right? We can see the smile on his or her face, right? So now we need the action verb within the sentences. The moon orbits the earth. The moon orbits the earth. We need to choose the correct action verb within that sentence. The moon orbits the earth, right? So what does the moon do? Because remember, you need to also ask yourself questions like, what does the moon do? Especially since the action verb tells us what the noun does. So the moon orbits the earth. What does the moon do? All right, so we are going to say it orbits. So you're gonna select orbits, right? And orbits is the verb and it tells us what the moon does, right? It orbits, right? The earth goes around, right? All right, we're going to the next one. Mom blends bananas to make bread. We need to choose the action verb within that sentence. Mom blends bananas to make bread? All right, so what does mom do with the bananas in order to make bread? She blends it. So we're going to use the word blend, right? We select the word blends, right? Mom blends it. So blends is the action verb, right? It's a verb and it tells us what mom does, right? She blends. The aquarium contains many different kinds of fish. We need to choose the correct um, action verb or the correct verb. All right, so the aquarium contains many different kinds of fish. So we will say contains, right? And it tells us what the aquarium does, right? So the action verb is contains and it tells us what the aquarium does, right? So that is basically us then being able to identify certain action verbs, right? All right. So now what we're going to do is we are quickly going to go back to our whiteboard. Now, can everybody see the picture? Nice and big. All right. So now it says that we need to match the verbs to the correct picture, right? So there's 3, 6, 9. There are 9 pictures, right? And there's 9 different words below the pictures, right? So we need to choose the correct words and then we need to write it under each picture, correct action verbs, and match it with the pictures. So we need to match the verbs to the correct picture. We're not going to listen, but we are just going to match the verb to the picture, right? So the verbs are sings, climbs, draws, cooks, swims, sleeps, eats, looks, and we have plays, right? So looks and plays. We need to choose one of these action verbs. So we need to choose of these action verbs and write it under each of the correct pictures. So if we look at the first picture, right? All right. So if we look at the first picture, what is the girl doing? The girl sings, the girl climbs, the girl draws, cooks, swims, sleeps, eats, looks, or play. What is this girl, the first girl, doing? She's sitting at the table having pizza with a knife and a fork. What is she about to do? All right, so which means that she eats, right? So we can then say she eats, right? So we're going to sketch out eats. All right, so that shows the action verb, or shows the verb, or shows what she is doing. Get the second picture. Little girl is under the blankets. What is she doing? So the words are sings, climbs, draws, cooks, swims, sleeps, looks, or plays, right? So we can then say this girl sleeps. Oopsie. She sleeps. All right. The next picture, right? It's a boy with is in the water, right? With goggles on. Is he singing? He sings, climbs, draws, cooks, swims, looks, or plays. What is this boy doing? Right? Remember the verb, it shows what the noun does. All right, so we can then say he swims, right? He swims. All right, so the mother is in the kitchen, busy with the pots, right? What is she doing? She sings, she climbs, draws, cooks, looks, or play. What is mom doing in the kitchen? Right? So mom cooks a nice meal. So mom cooks dinner, cooks lunch, cooks breakfast, right? Mom cooks. Then we have another one. The boy and the girl are they have pictures in front of them, crayons, scissors. What are they doing? They sing, climb, draws, looks, or plays. What are they doing? Right? All right, so we can then say they draw, right? The kids draws, right? Get the next one. It's got a rope that's kind of pulling him up, or not pulling him up, but it's like holding him. And that is either rock or mountain or something. He climbs, right? All right, look at the next picture, right? What are the kids doing? What are they doing? There's a little ball and some toys that they have in front of them. Do they sing, looks, or plays? What are they doing? Right? So we can then say that the kids plays. So these kids are playing, right? In this boy, right, there's music and he's got a mic in his hand, a microphone in his hand, which can then say that he is, what is he doing? All right, so he sings. And the last one is looks, right? So these are all action verbs, right? It is action verbs and it basically shows what the noun does, right? So action verbs, it tells us what the noun does, right? All right. So once again, an action verb, it tells us what the noun does. It expresses an action, whether it is physical or whether it is mental, right? And that is what we mentioned. Okay, so now we're going to go back and then we are going to do our last test. We're going to do the test on identifying action verbs. All right, so when we're identifying action verbs, it says we need to select the action verb. Bonnie peeled the peach. Bonnie peeled the peach. Is it Bonnie or is it peeled, right? What did Bunny do, right? Is it Bunny or is it peeled? What did Bunny do? That is the question that we need to ask ourselves. What did Bunny do? Peeled or Bunny, right? All right, so Bunny peeled the peach, right? Which means that the verb is peeled. Wonderful. All right, the driver honked the horn. What did the driver do? Is it driver or is it honked? So is it driver or honked? We need to say what the driver did. All right, so that is what the driver did. Wonderful. Mom blends bananas to make bread. So what did mom do? Right? We need to say what mom did. Mom blends bananas to make bread. Is it blends or is it bananas? Right? Blends or bananas. All right, so we can then say mom blends bananas to make bread, right? Grandma churns milk into butter. What does grandma do? Right? She churns or she milk. What does she do? She churns or she milks. All right, so we will then say that grandma churns. So if you have that, then well done. Great job, right? All right, so now that is us identifying action verbs, right? And once again, we said that an action verb, it basically tells a noun does, right? And an action verb can either show, it either shows action that is physical or it shows action that is mental, right? So if we quickly go back to our board over here, right? If we go back to our board, we are going to climb all the examples, right? The examples that we have is climb, dance, laugh, right, think, run, or walk, right? In order for us to also familiarize ourselves with the action verbs, then we also need to make a few sentences, right? In order to familiarize ourselves. Like, for example, the boy climbs on the wall or over the wall. The girls dance beautifully, right? The children laugh at the show or at the clown. Um, I write a letter to my grandma, right? I think about something, right? I run in the race or I run the race and I walk to the shop, right? So these are also examples and also a few that you can still think of, right? That you can make that shows action verbs, right? And remember, we said an action verb, it either shows that it is physical or it can be mental, and it basically tells us what the noun does, right? So now we're going to go to the A plus classes.ca, and then we are going to our learning materials. So go to your learning materials. Right, so once we are by the learning materials, right, then we go to reading. Then we're going to scroll right down by reading. All right, so then you'll see these four beautiful purple boxes, right? And then we'll go on to the first one, the third one that says read along audiobooks level 1, right? So we're going to start. All right, so now we're going to the next one. We're going to choose The Mountains, right? So we're going to read the book The Mountains or The Mountains. So you're going to click on the book, The Mountains, and then we are going to read along with the audio book, right? So you are going to just listen to the audio book and also read along, right? So it's The Mountains by Bill Brimmer. All right, so that is basically a book about the mountain, right? And the mountains, right? And it basically just explains or shows what they see when they go to the mountain, right? It is activities and things that they do, or not even activities, but it is things that they see, the beautiful things mainly that they see when they go to the mountains, right? And that was an audiobook not only for us to read but also for us to familiarize ourselves with certain words, right? And if we were to identify maybe an action verb within all of the pages that they basically just read, right, then we can say the action verb is see, right? It is something that they do, see, right? All right. All right, so that is our story on the mountain, right? That is our stories on the mountain. If you go to read along audiobooks level 2, right? So go to read along audiobooks level 2, right? All right, so then you'll maybe find pictures, right? You'll go maybe to, all right, let's go to Fox and the Pine. So this is not an audiobook, right? This is not an audiobook, however, this is basically just a normal book that you can read, right? It says skies seeped gray and ice, right? Sparked upon the ground. Throughout the wood, there wasn't a sound. If you already look at the writing, then clearly you can see that a child wrote this, right? The creatures were snoozing day after day, much to little Fox's dismay. When will this be over? Cried little Fox. But the only reply was a squirrel mock. All right. Or he moped through frost. I'm going to sleep for all winter eves. Under the pine, he found a spot to settle. With a face like a sour nettle. The noise had awoken Fairy Evergreen, who came out to inspect the scene. What on earth is the matter, little fox? Asked the fairy. and up he jumped a little weary. Well, I'm sad and I'm cold and ever so lonely. I feel this winter is going incredibly slow. But little fox, look back. Can you not see spring has begun? Would you agree? Buds and saplings are peeping. Dainty birds are cheeping. The scent of the pine blows, and it's happening right under your nose. Never forget, little fox, as hard as it seems, that the pine will remind you of warmth and sunbeams. Fairy evergreen, now I see, and most definitely would agree. My eyes were filled with frosty sadness, but now I'll dance and sing with gladness. Up woke the creatures of the wood that glistened, and little fox felt pleased he'd listened. Now the skies began to turn pastel blue, and new blossoms were covered with twinkling dew. Little fox will always remember the magic of the pine. When feeling low, light is waiting to shine. Little fox has come down with the winter blues and wants to hibernate away. With the help of Fairy Evergreen, can you spot the first signs of spring to make Little Fox happy again? Right? So that is the story about Little Fox, right? So the fox and the pine. They say that winter makes a little fox feel sad until a frosty fairy reminds him about optimism, right? Things to make him happy, right? So, grade fours, that is the end of our lesson. And that is the end of our lesson on action verbs, right? And we see that an action verb, it tells us what the noun does, and an action verb can either be physical or it can be mental, right? Thank you very much for joining our class and for also being very interactive. You should have an amazing evening further. Good night.